The Canon C100 Mark II might not record in 4K, and it might not have a huge variety of codecs. However, the internal compression is incredibly efficient and produces some very high quality files considering the small file size. But if you want to get the maximum possible quality out of your C100, then you're going to need an external recorder. My weapon of choice, the Atomos Ninja Inferno. Before I start analysing the differences between the C100 internal MP4 files and the Atomos Prores files, here is some test footage. So, did you see any difference in the test footage? Well, I'd be kind of surprised if you did, because especially on YouTube and the compression, it is quite difficult. So for that reason, I have uploaded all of that footage onto Vimeo, so you can have a look there if you want to see something that's a bit higher quality. But at least looking on my iMac anyway, I can see a few differences in the footage. So first of all, to really see any difference, you need to correct the footage, as it will be very hard to see anything with just the log files. Is it just me, or does whenever someone say I'm going to apply a really heavy grade to the footage, they just proceed to grade the footage badly? First, I'm going to add contrast by adjusting the levels, change the color a bit, add some saturation, and look at that. The image has really fallen apart there. Don't worry, I won't be doing that. Let's get rid of those nodes and instead do some basic corrections to the footage. Just the usual brightness, contrast, color temperature, and saturation balancing. So, looking at this, on first glance, you might not see any differences at all, but they are there. By zooming into 200% and looking at the background, you can see there's a few less compression artifacts. Yes, it might look like noise in the image, but it isn't. It is caused by the internal camera compression. Overall, the bokeh looks less muddy and smoother in the ProRes files than in the internal files. Looking at the shadow detail in the actor's coat, we can see a little more detail there too. Okay, let's try another shot and a more aggressive grade. First, I'm going to add contrast. No. For the more aggressive grade, I'm going to use film convert and some color space transforms to push the image a bit further than I normally would. After applying the corrections and the film convert plugin, yes, the footage looks a lot different to the original log files, but between the ProRes and internal MP4 files, there's really not much difference at all. Perhaps the only thing I can see is more detail in the hair, but I have to be looking really closely. The fact that this is a much brighter shot will also be helping the camera's internal compression quite a lot. So does this mean that in any well-lit scenario, you're not going to see any differences at all? Well, not quite. One of the main complaints regarding 8-bit codecs, like the ones that you can find in the C100, is that they do suffer from banding. Most of the time that really isn't a problem for me, or at least it's not bad enough for me to actually notice it. But when I apply the film convert grade to this shot of the sky, that's not good. Now, even though the ProRes files do a lot better, there's definitely still some banding going on, albeit much less noticeable. Remember that whilst the Atomos can record 10-bit ProRes files, the C100 can only output 8 bits. So what you're seeing here, it isn't true 8-bit, it's just 8-bit in a 10-bit container. Call it the best case scenario of an 8-bit color space, compared to the much more compressed internal image. Interestingly, I can also see quite a bit more detail in the edges of the clouds too, so whilst neither shot looks great, there is a pretty noticeable difference and the ProRes files do look a lot nicer. However, as soon as I apply a more normal grade, the differences are much more subtle. With a 200% zoom into the horizon, I can see a touch of banding in the H.264 files, which all but disappears in the ProRes files. Next, onto some low light shots. Once again, the differences are extremely minute. Under very heavy digital magnification, there's a small increase in detail, but this is at a 400% crop. What's more interesting is that there's a slight blue hue in the black areas of the internal MP4 files, but that isn't there in the ProRes files. I assume that this is caused by the noise being compressed by the camera, which is distorting the color of the black pixels. But overall, I am really having to pixel peep to actually see any difference here. Now this shot is a very low light shot with quite a lot of noise. Although, to give you an idea of how dark it was, this is how it looked to my eyes. So that's a pretty impressive effort on the part of the C100. Now this is an interesting test, because technically there is more detail in the ProRes files. As you'd expect, the noise is more clearly defined. But whilst this might give you a better result when using a denoiser, out of camera, I actually prefer the internal files as the compression smooths out the noise and makes it much less noticeable. But back to daytime shooting. This is a shot with a white balance that is quite a long way off. It's easily fixed in DaVinci Resolve, but let's see what a big white balance shift does to the results of our compression tests. Not much actually. Granted, her hair does look a bit sharper, and so do the red outlines on the radio controls, but still, as far as everything else goes, it's pretty similar. I thought it would be interesting to see what an external recorder can do for you in terms of dynamic range. As we've already seen in the dark areas of an image, you can get a little bit more detail, but what about in the bright areas of an image? Well, to test that, we have this clip which was shot at sunset with the camera pointing directly into the sun. And how much does this help with highlight detail recovery? None whatsoever. However, if you look at the background, it's quite a bit clearer. This shot from the same project also reveals that the ProRes files have a cleaner looking background too. In particular, I'm looking at the plants by the side of the road. The way the compression in the C100 works is it's able to save data when elements of an image are the same in surrounding frames, like when the camera is on a tripod. However, when the entire image is moving, like it is in this movie shot, there's less data available for the finer details to be captured. And this is why the higher bitrate ProRes files are able to capture the extra detail. But going back to highlight detail recovery, perhaps a less extreme example would yield better results. No, in this shot where the sun comes out halfway through the take, ruining the exposure, there's no difference in the detail of the bright areas of the image. And now, one last test, and I've saved the best until last. VFX, or visual effects for short, or for long. This is a green screen shot from a project I'm currently working on, and when I apply a quick clean plate and delta keyer in Fusion, we can see a big difference. Just look at the edges. It almost looks like the ProRes files were shot in a higher resolution. The edges are so much smoother and less blocky. Now I am fully aware that neither of these keys are great. If I was using this shot properly, then I'd do a whole load of extra things to recover the edges. But I think simply to show off the differences, this shot serves my purpose. Certainly the ProRes shot is going to be much easier to refine than the MP4 shot. So there you go, C100 Mark II internal MP4 files versus Atomos ProRes files. So just a quick recap, what are the benefits of using an external recorder? Well, you get more detailed colors and there is less chroma subsampling. You get a bit more detail in dark areas of your image, and overall there's a small increase in detail in things like hair. So, is it worth buying an external recorder? I would say yes it is, provided your expectations are realistic. You're going to see a big difference in heavy color grades, such as Film Convert or any other film emulation tool. You'll also see a very big difference for any visual effects work, especially green screening. You'll see a small difference if you're moving the camera a lot and want more background detail, or if you're having problems with your image starting to do some banding and you want a bit more color detail. As far as low light and overall image detail is concerned, you'll see a little more detail in the high quality ProRes files. And for bright areas of your image, there will be basically no difference in sharpness detail or in highlight recovery. It's also worth noting that the file sizes will be bigger. Depending on what flavor of ProRes you use, you can expect anywhere from 3 times to 6 times the size of the internal MP4 files. And lastly, which external recorder do I recommend for the C100 Mark II? Well, to save a long, drawn-out explanation, I would recommend you get either an Atomos Ninja 5, or if, like me, you want a bigger screen, then buy an Atomos Ninja Inferno. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing so as not to miss any new videos. See you later.